Welcome to Moveable Dough. This is Steve Danielson. Each week on Moveable Dough, I sit down with a composer to talk about their lives, their musical journeys, and, of course, their music. Come with me as we explore each unique path into composition and what they have to share with the world. For a complete archive of episodes, as well as access to the shorter segments called Movable Snippets, visit my website, sdcompose.com/movabledough.
Hey, this is Steve. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Moveable Dough. My guest today is Dr. Dwight Bigler. Dwight is the Director of Choral Activities at Virginia Tech University, where he has taught since 2009. He has been a clinician and guest conductor for high schools and universities throughout the country as well as internationally. Dwight earned his bachelor's and master's degree from Brigham Young University and a DMA from the University of Texas at Austin. He won the 2011 National Collegiate Choral Organization Choral Music Series Publication Contest and is a recipient of 2 Barlow Endowments for Music Composition grants. His music is published with Oxford University Press, Hinshaw, Walton, and Alliance Music Publishers. Dwight Bigler, welcome to Moveable Dough.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Looking forward to visiting with you.
Well, you know, Dwight, I think I have known you longer than any of the guests I've interviewed so far. So I first met
you're bad, but we go way back. It's true.
Yeah, so I first met you when I was a freshman at Ricks College, which is now BYU, Idaho, back in 1995, and you were the accompanist for our fledgling men's choir. And then you and I reconnected at BYU, and I tracked your career to Texas and then to Virginia. And you and I finally had a chance to meet up and talk now as colleagues at the ACDA convention in February. Everyone I know that knows Dwight Bigler absolutely loves Dwight Bigler. So I am so excited for my listeners to get to know you as well. So let's start back at the beginning. You grew up in Blackfoot, Idaho. What was your musical upbringing like there?
Oh, I love Blackfoot. Growing up there was beautiful. It's a small town, about 10,000 people, and we had some amazing music educators in the schools there in Blackfoot. They were key to training a group of us that have ended up working in music professionally. A number of our friends and colleagues that went through that program are now working. So it's a testament to the importance of having good music educators and a school system that supports that. My family sang and together all the time. My mother helped me write in my journal as a 5-year-old the day that we bought a piano. I was very excited, but I couldn't actually quite write it out. She was helping us learn how to write in our journals. And I have written in there, I still have the journal, today we bought a piano. A friend of ours in our ward, in our church, talked us into buying one. She said, "Your family needs a piano." And to try to distract her, my parents said, "Well, just come to the movies with us." She tried to tell them that there was a piano sale going on at the local music store. And so we took her to the movies, and then she said, "Well, you know, it's a midnight sale, so let's just drive right over there." And
Gotcha.
So anyway, so we grew up singing and playing, and our family was a band family. We didn't have an orchestra in the schools, but I started on piano and then dove into flute actually in 6th grade.
Okay.
I asked to start on the oboe, but you know, like a wise music educator, they knew that would be a little torturous for everyone involved as a 6th grader. So they said, learn the flute, has the same fingerings. And then I transferred over to oboe in 8th grade and played the piccolo in pep band and marched on the bass drum line in marching band and was the drum major.
Wow.
Played in the pit and played for musicals in the summer and sang in a mall. That was my first stage role and really only stage role, but I auditioned to be a shepherd and ended up with the lead role in a mall in The Night Visitors.
There you go.
Anyway, so it was a great place. Lots of music happening, a good community at both the church choir and school choirs and bands, and had some really great experiences.
Yeah. So I know you're a fantastic pianist. Did you pick it up really easy? Did you struggle? Was it like a fish in water? I mean, what was it like for you?
I was like a fish in water, with piano. And my piano teacher at that time, Marilyn Goodworth, a dear family friend, she tells me, like, she remembers more about it than I do. She said she would give me little assignments about doing little chord progressions and things, and I would come back and have learned it in all the keys somehow. And like, it just made sense to me. It felt very natural, and I just loved it.
That was awesome.
Yeah. So I just have always had that. I'm really grateful to have that background and have that kind of foundation on the piano. Has made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, I bet. So What sort of music were you listening to as a teenager? Were you just listening to classical music, or were something else on the radio?
Mostly radio, actually. I mean, my dad had some records we loved. When my mom and dad would have their date nights occasionally, we'd get out the records, and I have 8 siblings, and we would have dance parties. We'd put on the records, and he had some jazz. I remember he had West Side Story. He had the Grand Canyon Suite. There was some classical mixed in, but we had this whole set of the Reader's Digest. I need to go find these, actually. I don't know where the if we have them anymore, but there's this whole set of LPs that the Reader's Digest put out of folk songs and different things. And we grew up watching Donnie and Marie Osmond and the Lawrence Welk Show on TV. And but I'll never forget, I won a little boombox in middle school one year, and in the transition from cassette tapes to CDs, I remember listening with these amazing speakers to this program late at night that the radio guys would put on, and they were playing. I think it was a program called Star Tracks. They would play soundtracks from Star, like outer space kind of movies or
Okay.
future movies. So Back to the Future, Star Wars, Star Trek. Just and I was amazed at the sound. I fell in love. I recorded them all in little cassette tapes, back in the day when you could make your
record
own
off the radio.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember doing that. I made tapes that I listened to over and over and over and over and over again. Loved the soundtrack, especially John Williams. He's a big influence in my life. Orchestration, the rhythmic complexity, the layers, the harmonies. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. But I started studying when I was about 14. A piano teacher moved into the area, Shulamit Hoffman. She's from South Africa originally. Went to the Royal Academy in London, and then by a random kind of steps of finding jobs, and she found a husband in Canada and an ashram, and he found a job in Idaho with a computer company. Anyway, I hope I got all of those right in there. But anyway, she moved into Idaho Falls about a half an hour from my house, and so I started taking with her, and that opened up a whole new world of discipline and music, and she started lending me some CDs, Chopin and Tchaikovsky and things like that. So that was when I really started diving into my older teenage years, is when I really started learning more about classical music.
Okay, that's awesome.
Even in my piano solo things, I would learn. I did some Beethoven and things, but I would learn the boogie woogie, Bumblebee, the boogie woogie version of the Flight of the Bumblebee.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Like anyway, great fun. We can talk forever about all of that, but lots of good experience.
So I know when I was at Rick's, I sang an arrangement of yours for a new music concert. I think it was an arrangement of "We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet" or something like that.
Yeah.
And when did you start actually composing or arranging? Like what was the bug that drove you there?
I don't know what drove me there, but I've always been interested in that as well. My dear mother has been my scribe over time. I have a piece of paper from like 6th grade where she took a sheet of notebook paper and helped me write a song in kindergarten. Did I say 6th grade? I don't remember what I just said. But anyway, in kindergarten, I was 6 years old.
6 years old. There you go.
6 years old. So she helped write it out on a piece of paper. So that's my first little composition. I can't even sing it for you right now. That was probably a good thing. But I took some composition lessons from my high school choir teacher, Susan Mann. She was a big influence on my life as well in many ways. And I started entering some composition contests as a youth. I won the National Reflections program, second place.
Oh, wow.
Reflections program in the MENC in high school. So my choir teacher and I flew to New Orleans for that conference to play my little invention type in kind of the Bach style, a little piano solo piece that was the winner for that. And then I studied with Darwin Wilford up at Rick's College. Also great composer who wrote oratorios and organ pieces and all sorts of really wonderful things. So he taught me, and a couple of people there. I just have always kept it going on the side. Always been interested in it, and it's always fun to look back on your early compositions and you think, "What? Now I understand why composers in the past we don't have all their work," because we're very much learning in that process, and we need that time. We need those experiences. But sometimes I look back and think, "What was I thinking?"
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's funny though that some of those early pieces still are these bright shining moments oh, I found something in that piece, but all the rest of them not so much.
Yes, very much so. You can kind of point to the ones that do that, can't you? It's interesting. where you work, you write, and then something clicks suddenly in one of them, and you think, oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, and you keep
So I
building
do
up.
want to talk about another one of your past compositions for a second. So there was a piece that I did when I was at BYU, the first Noel. Um, I believe I did it when we were there. But this arrangement was also recently performed again at BYU, but with a slightly bigger emotional connection. And I'd like you to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, the first Noel. Yeah, I wrote that as a grad student there, and worked with David Sargent, one of the composition teachers there. I was studying with him at the time, and he helped me learn a lot in that process. Anyway, it's a real honor, first of all, to have the groups there perform because they're so good. You know, you get all of those 400 voices and full orchestra, and it just is such a glorious, beautiful sound. But the most recent one, they invited me back in 2018 to conduct it as the finale on their Christmas concert, which was a huge honor. I was really grateful for that. But just this last year, it was the final piece on their Christmas program, and a friend of mine from college back in the day sent me a little clip of it in the middle of the concert. He snuck in a little videotape and said, "I thought you might want to know that this your arrangement of the first Noel, these are the last notes that will sound on this stage before this entire building is demolished and they build a new music building on BYU campus." And that was the first time I could ever say that my music brought down the house, literally. But uh, but it was a real honor. I was honored to have them include that in their final concert in that concert hall. It meant a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was sad to say goodbye to the Dion Concert Hall.
Yeah, lots of memories in that hall, in that building. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, now you teach and direct choirs at Virginia Tech. So what gives you the most satisfaction as a teacher?
Seeing the meaning of music in these students' lives, I think, to see how it impacts them, see how much they love it, and how the depth of meaning as we work on a particular project and they learn the music and enjoy the rewards of a successful performance, as they learn vocal techniques, musicianship, and all of those kinds of things to have a really good performance. That experience of connecting with their fellow musicians and singing something together really well is very rewarding as a teacher. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that you write mainly for choir in your compositions. So thinking about your students that you might be teaching choral composition to, what do you think a good choral composition needs? Are there common ingredients that you think every piece should have?
Oh, that's a good question. I I think one of the main ingredients that most great choral pieces will have is a text that means something, and it doesn't mean that the text always has to be serious. The text can be delightfully entertaining and fun, but that's an important part of the human emotional experience. So I think great choral music has a text that engages across the spectrum of human emotion and experience in some way. So I think that's the first big step. And then beyond that, there's just so many options of chords and melodies and textures. There's some of the basic things that we talk about as far as writing in a way that puts the music in a tessitura that's doable, that takes advantage of the different colors of the voice and different ranges, and is aware of the textures that happen, the balances and the dynamics, and being able to create a texture that communicates the text well. The rhythm of the text is really important. You can have a good text, but if you end up with the wrong syllables on the strong beats, then it throws the whole thing on its head and it doesn't communicate well. So we talk a lot about those kinds of fundamental principles, and then creating harmonies in a way that creates this unique sound sculpture that's only possible when you put a bunch of voices together, where you get overtones, where you get this extra fill of sound, this extra body, this extra substance in the sound that you can only get when you have a group of people singing together. It's quite magical.
So thinking back on your education, I know you've already mentioned a couple. Who are one or the two of the key influential teachers that you've had, and what do you think you learned from them that you're still using today?
Good question. I think, oh yeah, lots of the ones that I've mentioned already had a big impact. Like Darwin Wolford, some of the things I'll forever remember from him are the detail that and the care that he took with hand notation, which is something that most students don't learn these days. It's all in computer notation software that does half the stuff for you. But knowing exactly what goes where on the page and how to notate it in a way when you have to write it out by hand, I really enjoyed that process, and I've always remembered that, and that impacts how I put the music on the page. But also some of the other composers that I haven't mentioned yet was working with Mac Wilberg, huge influence on my life. And I mean, you can hear it in the first Noel. The modulations are right out of the Wilberg modulation book. It's great. They work. They're really good. And there are others that he was influenced by as well. There's these long trains of influences, but Mac Wilberg for sure is a big influence, especially in choral arranging. The techniques that he uses and things was very, very influential. I'm very grateful for his guidance in all of that. And Ron Staley, the repertoire that he picked when I was singing in the BYU Singers, that had a huge impact on developing my personal aesthetic for choral singing, what's possible in a choir, and then working with the Dale Worland Singers, and all of these conductors, Mac Wilberg, Ron Staley, Dale Worland, they all are composers and arrangers as well. So singing their music and learning from them, both from their music and the music that they select to perform, like all of that impacts you because they're only going to pick music that they love. So right. You can learn from the different variety of composers that they choose to perform, as well as learn from their compositions themselves. It's really you can always learn something, whether I'm sitting at a piano playing for a rehearsal, or if I'm singing in the group, or if I'm writing something for the group. My grad studies at University of Texas, I studied with Dan Welcher, and we would play piano duets through a lot of the masterworks, Beethoven symphonies and Brahms symphonies, things like that. And he was very influential, just knew so much music, and would give good examples of texture and color and orchestration and things like that. Very influential as well.
That's amazing. All right, I got one more question for you. When you're not musicking, what do you like to do for fun? What sort of hobbies do you have?
That's a good question too. I like that question. I like to be outdoors. I don't get outdoors enough, but we grew up camping as a family, so I love to hike and be outside. I love to cook. Actually, I like to read. Go to shows. I try to plan a trip to New York once a year to go see the Broadway shows and some of the theater. Go to museums. Love travel and museums and reading. Those are the main things. These days, I also try to take care of my cat.
Someone's got to do it, right? Oh,
yes,
Chopin.
exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. Some friends of mine rescued him, and they named him Chopin to convince me to adopt him, and it totally worked.
Great. All right. But before we take a quick break, I'm going to ask Dwight to play a quick game that this week we're calling You Have How Many Kids? I'm going to ask you a series of 5 true or false statements about Johann Sebastian Bach. You are a winner just for playing the game, so just do your best.
All right.
All right. Number 1, true or false? J.S. Bach had 20 children, including 3 sons, also named Johann.
It was close to 20. I'm going to say true.
Well, the 20 was true. The part that was false was the 3 sons named Johann. He actually had 5 sons named Johann. Family tradition. They were usually referred to by their middle names or initials. Johann Christoph, Johann Gottfried Bernhard, Johann Christoph Friedrich, Johann August Abraham, and Johann Christian. Not to mention his daughter Johanna.
I love it. Right. See, I'm learning something from these two. This is good.
There you go.
I'm glad at least I got half of that question right. That's good.
All right. Number 2, true or false? Both born in Germany in 1685, J.S. Bach and George Friedrich Handel were fast friends throughout their lives.
Oh, unfortunately, false.
That is false.
All wish that they had met.
Yeah.
But is it true that Bach tried to meet him and Handel was like, nope?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't ever heard that story.
I have that story in my head from somewhere. I should probably find out.
I have to look that one up.
Pass it on in my choir literature.
All right. Number 3, true or false? Bach was deeply religious and would add to even his secular manuscripts the initials INJ in nomine Jesu.
Oh, they were different initials. He was very religious, but glory be to God. I forgot what the letters were,
Well,
though.
yeah, same. Yeah, Inomina Jesu.
Is that what they were? In Sol. I forgot
That
what they were. Soli Domine or something. I forgot what they are. What the
Yeah,
letters are.
he may
Is
have
that what
had
they
some
wrote?
different things, but yeah, that was what I read that
Oh
he
yeah.
wrote on
Okay.
there. Yeah, staunch Lutheran, very religious.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right.
He put that at the end of his. Yep. Good.
Yeah. Number 4, true or false? He came from a musical family. He had several musical children and a plethora of musical grandchildren.
True.
Well, true-ish. It was true about the children, false about the grandchildren. He only had one prominent musician grandson.
The grandchildren I didn't know for
Yeah.
sure. But
So
before
I
him,
guess,
ancestors and his kids were very
yeah,
musical.
he was
Yeah.
sort of the peak, and then it sort of faded out after that.
Yeah. Oh, these are good questions. You like throw little tricks in there.
I know, I'm tricky. All right, last one. Number 5, true or false? His genius and most of his works were not appreciated during his lifetime.
That's unfortunately true also.
That is true. Yeah, his music wasn't played much after his death until Felix Mendelssohn performed Bach's St. Matthew Passion, and people rediscovered the genius of Bach.
Yeah.
Well, Dwight, thank you for playing the game. You're a winner just for playing, and I think we both learned something today.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
after a quick break, we are going to listen to some of Dwight's compositions. Hey, this is Steve. I know you're sitting here listening to Moveable Dough and you're thinking to yourself, how could I make a podcast, Steve? Well, let me tell you. Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. Okay, here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or your computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you could start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I've really enjoyed the flexibility that it allows me in creating my podcast. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome back. This is Steve Danielson. I'm talking today with Dr. Dwight Bigler. So we're going to first start today with Old Joe Clark for SATB, piano, spoons, stomping, and fun. So this is a great example of a folk song arrangement that just sounds like a lot of fun to sing. When you set out to make an arrangement of a folk song like Old Joe Clark, what do you do to make it sound fresh and not overly cheesy?
Oh, that's a fine balance to walk, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my approach to this particular piece, actually, I'll just tell you about how this piece came to be. I knew I wanted to write a piece for an honor choir, a 2-day event with high school students, that we were not going to send them the music beforehand. So I knew we had to teach it quickly. They had to be able to learn it in 2 days. So that meant that I had to write choir parts that were structured well enough that they could learn them very quickly.
Yeah.
So there are techniques that I used in it, like having the soprano and tenors, like the first 2 verses, the soprano and tenor sing the same line, and the altos and basses sing the same line, so you can teach it to them at the same time.
Right.
Just kind of pedagogical strategies that went into the composition of it to help it be a quick learn. And but I didn't want it to be boring also, so I put the interest in the piano part. I put the difficult stuff in the piano part, and then wrote in, I think there are 10 key changes, if I remember right, in this piece. And for singers, key changes are not difficult. It's by ear. You movable dough. There you go.
Right.
Let's move to another area. Here we go. It's hard for the pianist.
Right. The poor pianist has to.
Yeah, there are 10 key changes, but I think it starts in C and it ends in C, so that it's only 9 different keys that they have to play in. But for the piano part, I brought in some influences of Gottschalk. I imitated all sorts of little fiddle and instrumental kind of stuff in bluegrass tradition, and then tried to. That's what really brought the interest. Adding some metric kind of surprises, unexpected things, dynamic contrasts, pacing the high notes so that you get to that at the end. There are things like that that I use to help structure it so that it's interesting. Yeah.
Good. How did the students respond to it?
They did really well. They enjoyed it. Yeah. The clapping part in the middle, I gave a couple of different the claps and stomps. I suggested some choreography for it actually, but you can do it with just stomps and claps, or just slapping your leg, or whatever. There's lots of flexibility with that, but they always enjoy something like that. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to listen now to Old Joe Clark, published by Walton Music.
Clark, he had a mule, name was Morgan Brown, and every tooth in that mule's head was 16 inches round.
Old Joe Clark had a yellow cat, neither sang nor prayed, stuck her head in a buttermilk jar and washed her sins away.
Round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round that way. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away.
I went up to the mountain top, a humping sugar cane, stuck my foot in a holler log, and out jumped Liza Jane.
I asked my girl to marry me, what do you think she said? Time enough to marry you, but all the rest are dead. Oh, round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Old Joe Clark, he had a house 15 stories high, and every story in that house is filled with chicken pie.
I went down to Old Joe's house, he invited me to supper. I stuck my show, my table, tables, and my sons, my butter, 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 butter.
Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round and round I say. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Wish I was a sugar tree standing in the sun. Every time a pretty girl passes, takes some sugar down.
I wish I had a sweet one, I set her on the shelf, and every time she smiled at me, I get up there myself.
Round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, round and round I say. Round and round, Old Joe Clark, dance your cares away. Dance your cares away.
All right, our second piece today, I did not tell Dwight that I was going to pick this one, so this could be a surprise for him. We're going to talk about a piece that I remember doing at BYU. We called it Sinner's Redemption at the time, but I believe it was published under the title All Ye Who Are to Mirth Inclined.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is for SATB and Wind Ensemble, and I remember loving this piece when we did it at BYU. And I even contacted you many years later, so I get the music for my high school students to sing.
Mhm.
The mixed meter, heavenly accented phrasing makes this piece infectious. So tell us a little bit about writing this one.
Oh my goodness. You brought up an oldie. Uh, this was a fun one. I found the tune in the Oxford Book of Carols, and I loved the mixed meter version of it, how it kind of shifts throughout, and I loved the minor key modal kind of sound and the harmonies that brought with it. And it has a bit of an unwieldy title. Is a lot of words, but originally wrote it for brass chorus, actually. So just, I think 12 or 13 brass instruments, just
Okay.
brass. No woodwinds or anything. It was some percussion on the side. And then made an adaptation for it. You can do it with just piano or brass quintet and piano. And yeah, I that was a fun one. It was published originally by Oxford University Press. Unfortunately, they, for some weird reasons, it was at a time in Oxford University Press's history where they were had a fairly frequent turnover of editors. So the editor that agreed to publish it was different than the editor that was there when they actually went through the process of doing the layout and whatnot. For some reason that I still don't understand, actually, they decided to only publish the full score. So if a choir wanted to do it, every person in the choir had to have a full score, and there was not a piano reduction that they made available for even rehearsals. And I pushed and begged and pleaded, and I didn't put it in the contract originally. The editor in charge at that point said I didn't need to get that specific, but I learned that yes, indeed, you do need to get that specific with the format of the piece that they want out there. So it didn't sell well. The piece didn't survive at Oxford University Press, and is out of print now with them. And I actually have the copyright back. So if somebody wants to perform, I would love to share it with them. But that was a big lesson. I have huge respect for Oxford University Press. Of course, they have such great music out there. But it was just a weird situation where for this particular piece, the person in charge at the time thought, nope, we're just doing this. We're getting this done. But I was thrilled with how the piece came across. I think choirs love it. It builds to the end. It has fun instrumentation parts, I think. And you remembered it, which is a good sign.
That's right. And I hope by playing it here that we'll get some more people interested, and they can contact you and perform this again in the future. So we're going to listen to All Ye Who Are to Mirth Inclined, performed here by the combined BYU Choirs and Wind Ensemble. All right. Lastly, we are going to talk about your major work that premiered last year, Mosaic of the Earth, for SATB, 4 soloists, and orchestra. 75 minutes long, premiered last April in 2022 by the Virginia Tech School of Performing Arts and the Blacksburg Master Chorale, which you also conduct, yes?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've had a chance to listen to the entire work, and it's fantastic. We'll only have a chance to listen to excerpts from the full work. I do plan on playing a good chunk of it. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the whole thing. So this is a piece about the environment. So tell us how it all came about and what you want to say about it.
Yeah. Mosaic for Earth. It is a gigantic piece, bigger than I expected when I first set out on this process. But when I first moved to Virginia in about 2009, and began working with this community choir. One of the things I love about community choirs is the diverse makeup of the choir itself. We have people of all ages and backgrounds, and a number of Virginia Tech faculty from different departments that love to sing. And in that group, I met a couple of key figures. Mary Denson Moore was an instructor in the English department and taught an environmental literature class. And she was the board president of the Master Chorale. And so we got to work together, and she shared some of the books that she teaches in that class. Here in Virginia, there are lots of environmental issues that we're facing. Mining is a huge issue, an impact on the environment here, especially mountaintop removal, and the impact that it has on the communities around it, economically, health issues, cancer rates, all of those kinds of things. We have some of the most polluted rivers in the country, fairly close to here. It's a beautiful region. We have some of the oldest mountains in this region on the planet. Some of the oldest and most diverse ecological systems here. So as I started to get to know this, I knew I wanted to write a piece for choir and orchestra. I knew from my experience as an oboist in university back in the days of Ricks College, playing in the orchestra, some of my favorite pieces were when we would combine the choirs and orchestra together. I just really loved that combination, that kind of overwhelming and just surround sound of those kinds of things, the impact and power that those can have. And so I thought I would, as I learned about the environmental issues here in Virginia, I decided to write an oratorio type piece that was multi-movement for soloists and orchestra, to harness the power of music in a way that could communicate, engage, and spark conversations, and hopefully in the end spark motivation for people to actually act and do something related to these issues that we're facing. It's impacting everybody on the planet. Climate change is happening in different ways around the planet, but having a big impact overall. Migration and economic impacts and health impacts, all sorts of things. And so I thought, I wondered for a long time how I could contribute something to these conversations. And with music, I know that music has an amazing power to connect and inspire and motivate. It's why we have it as such a powerful part of worship services, for example. It's a great way to bring people together, to teach, to inspire, to lift, and to motivate. So I decided to write Mosaic for Earth to be my contribution to this conversation, to these really important issues nowadays. And the name, I didn't know the name until towards the end of the process of putting it all together. I was reading all sorts of books. Terry Tempest Williams was a big influence in the structure and the content at the beginning. Her books, The Hour of Land and When Women Were Birds. And the book that actually helped me figure out the name was her book, Finding Beauty in a Broken World. And in that book, she talks about mosaics and how they're made of broken glass. And when we face these tragedies in life that we all do on some level, how do we survive from? How do we recover, or how do we move on? How do we take the broken pieces and make something beautiful? So, another big key influence in the piece was Barbara Wolf, a New York City artist who did these amazing set of illuminations of Psalm 104 in the old medieval style on actual vellum, animal skin, painted with beautiful gold calligraphy, gold leafed Hebrew letters for each psalm in Psalm 104, and then these stunning illustrations that have to do with the theme of that particular verse. It kind of follows the Genesis stories, celebrating the heavens, and then the mountains and the oceans and the trees and the birds and the plants. And so there are 9 or 10 of these illuminations. And she kindly gave me permission to include them in the concert, to show them up on the screens. But when I found those works, I knew that those were going to be the anchor of Mosaic for Earth, because those were celebratory. And I didn't want to write a piece that was dark, totally dark. In my brain, having those celebratory pillars were the key to the contrasting text that showed what we're in the middle of right now, the challenges that we're facing. It was a key to the dramatic flow of the piece, so that we can have celebration and then juxtaposition with some of the darker texts that describe our current situation, and then back to celebration. It helps us to see what we're losing and to see what we may lose if we don't do something and act in this area. Yeah.
Oh, it really is a mosaic of texts. And sorry,
Yeah,
I had
no,
to go
you're
there.
absolutely no, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the movements, if you look at typical pieces like this, there's one librettist oftentimes,
Yeah, this is a big collection of
but
different
it's like
poets and
9 different
yeah.
poets. Yeah, Terry Tempest Williams, Eric Rees, an amazing author here close to Virginia. He's in Kentucky, and he wrote a book called Lost Mountain that documents the destruction of a mountain called Lost Mountain. Actually, that's its name.
No.
He documents the destruction of it over the period of a year through mountaintop removal and looks at all the impact, the corporate kind of involvement in that, and how so often in these situations, especially in this mining region of Appalachia, the resources are just sucked out of there in so many ways. The people who live there, most of them, get very few of the benefits of this immense wealth that has been created by extracting and destroying these mountains. So Eric Rees and W.S. Merwin, a U.S. poet laureate who has some just amazing poems about environment. A poem by his called I just forgot the name. For a Coming Extinction. Oh my goodness, my brain tonight's tired. For a Coming Extinction, which is a poem about a conversation between a human being talking to the last gray whale, as the whale now is extinct and goes to talk to the great creator, goes to talk to God, and the human being is telling this animal what to tell God about his extinction and what it means for humans, and what it's a haunting piece, actually, a haunting poem. Appalachian poets, Albert LeBeau, archaeologist with the National Park Service, who works. I actually found a quote of his in a book by Terry Tempest Williams. I found another text by another author in Eric Rees's book, Lost Mountain. So it really is a mosaic, and a number of the movements have texts by multiple authors that are put together that relate and give insights to the topic of that particular movement throughout Mosaic for Earth.
That's great. So if you were trying to sell someone on this piece and you only had a chance to play one movement for them, which movement would you play and why?
Well, that's a difficult question. But I think three movements come to mind. That's more than one. But I would say number 7 is a really important movement to the piece, because it has this contrast that I'm talking about, where it starts with the text from Eric Rees's book with the baritone soloist, and also N. Scott Momaday, a Native American author. The piece starts with encouraging people, saying every man ought to have this experience of going into the mountains and seeing the beauty. And then it transitions to a description that Eric Rees has of climbing a mountain and seeing it destroyed. And then it transitions to this beautiful, inspiring text by Terry Tempest Williams saying, talking about the hour of land. Now is the time that we need to reconnect. This is our opportunity to reconnect to the earth and listen to the land first. Let our human priority as number one, let that go for a little bit and understand who we are in context of life on this planet, and recognize what that means. And I think it ends with a melody and harmony and kind of texture that I hope is really motivational and inspiring. So I would say probably number 7.
Okay.
Number 13, the second to last one, has a text by Stuart Udall, Secretary of the Interior of the United States, who writes a letter to his grandchildren about what he hopes that they will do. It's a very powerful and beautiful text. The children's choir sings in that movement. So probably one of those.
Well, I won't hold you to it. All right. Well, we are now going to listen to excerpts from Mosaic for Earth, performed by the Virginia Tech School of Performing Arts and the Blacksburg Master Chorale, conducted by Dwight Bigler.
Oh,
the branches they sing, among the branches they sing, among the branches they sing.
Sometimes the whole farm family comes a place of the waters long, to find their farms and rolled up like a rug with them inside it. We will be shaken, shaken, shaken. All to the streets of Cincinnati, it's a ring I seem to get, dismounting boys on dark nights. Firing the serial number smooth, following the north like so many dogs, disposing of them parts by stolen parts of farms turn up in unlikely places. So the great boys from the tasty birdies of the park are up against the wall, lending a rustic effect.
All right. Well, Dwight, if my listeners want to learn more about you, where can they find you online? Do you have a website or a
Yes,
place that they should go?
Yes, www.dwightbigler.com. That's just my personal website that I have most of my compositions on there, and all of the ones that we've talked about and more. And we actually have a website for the Mosaic for Earth project, and I would encourage people to go there as well, mosaicforearth.org. It has information about how to get the music. It's self-published, so they have to order it from me. But it has also instructions for getting permissions and some of the details in order to do the work, because there are a lot of copyrighted texts in it. So I've come up with a pretty easy way, hopefully, to help people be able to kind of go through that process really easily. It has recordings and things like that, as well as additional resources about sustainable living and other ways that you can get involved in addressing climate change issues. So both of those websites, I would encourage people to visit freely and reach out anytime. Email me any questions, insights, things you want to share. I love to meet new people and make new friends.
Awesome. Well, hey, listeners out there, as we are getting close into summer, it's a great time to break out your Movable Dough t-shirt. What's that, you say? You don't have one? Well, you are in luck, because right now you can visit sdcompose.com/movabledough and click where it says merch. And guess what that will do? That's right. It will take you to the TeePublic page where you can get your own Movable Dough t-shirt. They're soft, they're comfortable, and they're the perfect way to show how much you love the Movable Dough podcast. Visit sdcompose.com/movabledough today and click where it says merch. Well, Dwight, it has been such a joy to talk to you. Thank you for joining me on Movable Dough.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
My guest today was composer Dr. Dwight Bigler. If you have a recommendation for a future guest or an idea for the show, please email me at movabledough@gmail.com. This is Steve Danielson. Keep the music moving.